So here we go. Kate, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is also Kate. I'm Kate Bowman, and I'm joining you today from Salt Lake City in Utah. And I work for a nonprofit organization called Utah Clean Energy, and the mission of our organization is to accelerate the transition to clean energy here in Utah. And it's cool to be here because this is definitely the sort of thing that I would have benefited from when I was getting close to graduation. And I think it definitely would have helped me to, understand some of the opportunities that are out there and figure out, what sort of path I wanted to take once I graduated. And I think I'm really excited to have the chance to talk a little bit about what I do today, because I think it's been exciting to follow the development of the Irving Institute and energy issues at Dartmouth, because I think we're in a moment where the energy industry is entering a period of a lot of change and growth, and it hasn't always been a field or an industry that attracts a lot of younger people or is really known for being kind of innovative or cutting edge. We kind of expect our electricity to be reliable and dependent and there when we want it, and not necessarily to ask more of it. But the challenges that we're facing right now really require that we think differently about things, and that some of the ways that we think about energy have to change really quickly, and we have to really go through this transformational shift in order to address climate. And the cool thing is there's also new technologies that are making that possible, and that are enabling these totally new products and services and ways that we think about our relationship with energy and our energy usage. And so there's so many problems to solve, and whether you're interested in the technical details of figuring out how do we keep adding solar to the grid while keeping it reliable, or designing programs that increase access to renewable energy, there's just so many opportunities to help solve all of the problems that we need to address to be a part of that shift. And as for my background, I'm originally from Washington, D.C., and my parents worked for the State Department. And so I moved around a lot when I was growing up. I never lived anywhere more than 2 or 3 years. So when I was at Dartmouth, that was the first time I was really in one place for 4 whole years in a row. And so that was kind of a new experience for me. And while I was there, I was really involved in the outing club, and I learned to rock climb and kayak and backcountry ski, and I spent a lot of my time on VOC trips. And as I thought about graduation, I realized I really enjoyed the kind of just the experience of getting to be in one place and to build a community, and having the opportunity to live somewhere long enough that you feel like you really are part of a community and belong there. And I loved, I loved skiing. I loved doing these things outdoors. And so I felt like when I graduated, I didn't have a clear path of what I wanted to do, but I felt like I did want to have the chance to live somewhere where I could do the things I really enjoyed, and live somewhere that I really enjoyed doing, or that I really enjoyed, being there, and have the chance to sort of feel like I was there for more than just, a couple of years. And I think that one of the things that really helped me get a clear idea of what I wanted to do was when I took a class on environmental law as part of the government program. So I was a government major. I had a really hard time deciding between anthropology and government because I found them both really interesting. And I started thinking that I wanted to go into international affairs just because that's what I kind of had experience with growing up. But I took this course my senior year focused on environmental law. And through that, I started to really learn more about natural resource law and public lands management. And I think I was really struck by some of the really complex challenges that come from figuring out how to manage our resources and how to manage all of these different competing uses. And because of my interest in outdoor recreation, I felt like I began to really encounter places where those conflicts were visible to me, either, as a kayaker who wanted water in the river so that we could go kayaking, knowing that there's, that water is also super important for agriculture and hydropower, things like that. And so that class in particular really impressed on me that the rules and the policies that we put in place really decide, who gets access to what and how. And well-intentioned policies can really go awry too if they're not designed and implemented well. So that led me to take a senior seminar class that was focused on environmental law, and in particular on Western water law, and realized that that was something where I really felt like I was super interested in it. I felt like there were problems that I was excited to learn more about and to help solve, and that it was something I could, I kind of wanted to pursue once I graduated. And so I graduated in 2010, and it was a really different environment and totally different set of challenges than the challenges that, if any of you are graduating soon, that you're facing right now. But it was just 2 years after the financial crisis. And so the economy was still not in a super great place. And it definitely felt like, going into the world, it felt like there was this additional set of challenges that was super tough to know how to navigate. And I was definitely, identified organizations that were doing work that I thought was really interesting, but I had a hard time finding entry-level positions, and I still felt like I didn't know, exactly what I wanted to do or even kind of where I wanted to do it. And so when I graduated, I stayed around for a summer and I built Titcomb Cabin on Gilman Island. It had just caught on fire and burned down my senior spring, and so I was able to stay around for the summer and help rebuild the cabin, which was a really awesome experience. And that winter, I moved to Salt Lake City to work at a ski resort, and I figured it would be, awesome to live at a ski resort for the winter, and they covered my room and board. So it was a really good time. And then once I got here, I found I really loved Utah. And I, over the course of about a year, I eventually saw an opportunity for an internship with the organization that I work for now, Utah Clean Energy. And it actually came up kind of as a referral from a friend that I skied with. And it's worth noting that when I started here, I knew absolutely nothing about energy in particular, but I realized I did know that energy and energy use is a really critical component of a meaningful response to climate. And when I interviewed, I felt like the organization was doing the sort of work that I wanted to be doing on policy development and problem solving. So I started here as an intern through the AmeriCorps program, and then I've been here 8 years now, which is really still amazing to me. It's gone really fast, but my position and the work that I do has really evolved over time. So I feel like I've been able to keep learning and moving into areas that are more interesting to me. And as I mentioned, just the landscape of energy has changed so much since I've started that it's been really amazing to see that shift in such a short amount of time. So that's a quick summary of, who I am and how I got here.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kate. Just before we dive into the questions that we had prepared, I just have a quick question for you, which is, like, it sounds like you're saying that, like, upon starting this job at Utah Clean Energy, you had taken an environmental law class, you were generally interested in the environment and, outdoor stewardship, but you didn't have any like specific energy experience. I'm wondering, like, jumping into this totally new environment, like, what was your, like, some people, you were taking a chance there, and like you might have found that it wasn't very interesting to you, and you left after a year and moved on to the next thing. I'm wondering, like, you've been with Utah Clean Energy for a number of years now, and I'm wondering, like, what was the spark that got you really excited about that work, or made you realize it was really for you and made you choose to stay for so long?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess it's worth noting too that between when I worked and also when I started at Utah Clean Energy, I mentioned I was almost an anthropology major. And so after I graduated, I thought, well, maybe I'm interested in doing some sort of, field anthropology, field archaeology. So I actually got a job working as a staff archaeologist at a cultural resource management firm for a year. And so I did that in between, and I figured, the only way to figure out if you're going to like something is to try it, right? And so I tried that, and there were things I really liked about it, but I think the thing that I missed was the feeling that what I was working on was something that was important and, changing things in a way that was important to me. So when I started at Utah Clean Energy, it was immediately obvious to me that everyone who worked there was really passionate about the work that they were doing. I mean, everyone believed in the mission, and that it was an organization where everyone who worked there was focused on finding solutions and kind of the really complicated work of, navigating some really difficult challenges to ultimately kind of keep that long-term vision in mind and find solutions that were workable and were going to be successful. Mm-hmm. And there was just an attitude about it, I think, where I felt like, this is a place where I can learn a lot. I can come in not knowing a lot, but I can learn so much from the people around me, and I'll have the mm-hmm. opportunities to take on things that are going to be, challenging, but also meaningful, and are kind of moving the dial on something that I really care about.
Mm-hmm. So can you actually talk about what that looks like for you in your current position on a day-to-day basis, and what are some of the most exciting projects that you're working on right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my title is the Renewable Energy Program Manager, and so I'm the lead for Utah Clean Energy on programs that are related to wind or solar, and that includes like utility scale resources, but also things like rooftop solar. And we also work on issues related to energy efficiency and building efficiency, and electric vehicles. So I can get pulled into things like that as well. But a lot of my focus is on renewable energy. And I'd say I spend maybe a third of my time on utility regulation proceedings. So looks a little different in every state, but in Utah, we have a monopoly utility that provides electricity and has to go before a state agency to get approval for significant decisions that they make. And so Utah Clean Energy intervenes in that process to make the case for the benefits of transitioning to clean energy, and to make sure that we recognize, the costs associated with other forms of energy, and that we're making smart long-term resource decisions when it comes to things like building power plants or allowing people to install rooftop solar. And so I really enjoy that. It's a pretty like wonky and technical arena, but there's really important long-term decisions made there. And so I really enjoy kind of getting to be a voice in that arena to make the case for why it's smart to transition to clean energy right now. And so I spend a solid amount of time working on programs that are funded through that are usually kind of a special, funded through grants or major partners with a specific goal. So one example is I got to oversee a partnership with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, where we were selected as a team to work with researchers there to inform development of a plan that would help local governments here in Utah to reach 100% renewable electricity. So we had a coalition of local governments with a goal to reach 100% renewable electricity by 2030, and we got to kind of interface with researchers at the National Renewable Energy Lab who are doing this like primary research on topics, and figure out how we can leverage their resource to sort of help these cities figure out how to meet their goals. So we've also had we've had a few Department of Energy funded projects that are similar to that, where they're focused on leveraging these resources to advance the market for solar here in Utah. And then the last kind of part of my like things I do on a day-to-day basis is I think working for a nonprofit, you wear a lot of hats. And so I have to spend a lot of time communicating the work that I'm doing to our funders or to supporters, or working with business partners who are trying to understand the landscape in Utah and want to figure out what's going on here. Or, over the years, I've designed brochures and coordinated test drives for electric vehicles. And, maybe it's talking to reporters about something that I'm working on right now that they're interested in. So there's the other miscellaneous category of, I think the things that are important to try and convert that like really technical, dense work that we do in some arenas into things like that help people understand what we're working on, or help communicate, why it's important. in other arenas.
Mm-hmm. So earlier you were talking about trying to get Utah communities on board for this 100% renewable goal. Now this there are cities and, towns and communities across the country that are committing themselves to be 100% renewable energy by 2025 or by 2030 or by 2050. And, actually the town of Hanover here in New Hampshire is also has committed itself to that goal. And one thing that I think that the whole Hanover community has learned as they've tried to, take the steps to meet that goal is that the environment that you're in, like the physical environment, is really going to make it, relatively easier, relatively challenging to meet that goal, just in terms of the resources that you have available to you. I'm wondering if you can talk about the renewable resources that actually exist in Utah and how the state and maybe the communities within that state are trying to position themselves to take advantage of those resources, either for, renewable energy goals or for, just the economy and financial prosperity in the state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question and a great observation. And so in Utah, it's a really sunny place, and so the main kind of resource that we have available to us is solar. And there's some wind resources here, mostly in like a little bit to our north in Wyoming and Idaho. They tend to have better wind resources, but we do have some good wind resources in Utah as well. So and then I think, unlike some states on the East Coast, we have a lot more space too, right? So it's easier to figure out where to put renewable resources, although there's always conflicts over, other types of land use. And so I think you bring up a good point that when as communities are setting 100% renewable energy goals, there's also a part of setting that goal that means where you have to really define what that means for your community. And so a lot of 100% renewable goals are focused on net 100% renewable energy, and that's what the goals that the local governments here in Utah have set. So they've set a goal to have net 100% renewable electricity by 2030, which just means that the number of kilowatt hours that you use in your community has to be equal to the number of renewable kilowatt hours that you're purchasing. So, it's a step above and beyond goals that are focused more on certification and buying energy that's kind of, tagged with green attributes. The goal is focused on actually acquiring renewable kilowatt hours, not just sort of the certificates associated with them. But it's not the same as, 100% renewable energy in real time. Mm-hmm. Right. And so the cities aren't, isolating themselves from the grid and operating as their own independent system. They're still connected to the grid. And so it doesn't necessarily go, as far as we need to drive the grid forward as a whole. But seeing all these different communities that are doing that and setting goals it's really important. And it's moving us in the right direction. And so I think, like I mentioned, there are a lot of the renewable energy resource development that's going on in Utah is large scale solar, which is a great resource for the state. That means, companies are looking to locate here because they have renewable energy goals and they want to locate somewhere where they can access renewable energy. So Facebook is building a data center here because they know that Utah is a good place to also build solar that they can use to reach their renewable energy goals. And, it means we have this resource that we're well positioned to be able to export power to other states around us and to provide that. And I think, to me, where one of the really interesting, remaining questions is how do we keep, continue progress towards adding renewable energy to the grid, but make sure we're taking advantage of the benefits of smaller, more distributed resources too. So, when you have a solar farm in southern Utah and you're here in Salt Lake City in the northern part of the state, if you have a grid outage, that solar is no longer useful, for example. Whereas if you have solar located here somewhere in the community, you can actually use that as emergency backup power. And there's all these other kind of sets of benefits that come with it. So I think the economics and the cost of solar and wind in particular has come down so much that it's becoming a really important part of our grid, which is exciting, but I don't think it's necessarily, we haven't figured out how to really maximize the potential of solar resources, not just as a renewable resource, but as something that can be, behave in ways that are totally different from a central power plant.
Mm-hmm. So actually one question, jumping off of what you were speaking about, also a minute ago about how communities' renewable energy goals are really about net electricity usage rather than, minute by minute usage. So what I'm hearing you say, and I'm a little bit going to explain this for the students on the call who may be a little bit unfamiliar with these concepts, but because you only generate solar during the daytime, if you have no way to store it, you can use all the energy you're generating during the daytime, but then you have to switch to another source of energy during the nighttime. So I'm wondering, I'm assuming that these communities that have these, net 100% renewable energy goals, I'm assuming they're going to be overproducing during the daytime and then buying power from another source during the nighttime. Has Utah given this like amazing like source of solar energy, this is this amazing solar resource? Is there a vision to like really innovate and really invest in battery storage technology in order to potentially one day be able to generate all the electricity that the state is using solar?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think we're on the sort of the start of a really exciting shift there, because solar is becoming more and more affordable. And the amazing thing about it is that, a traditional power plant, once you build the power plant, you still have to buy fuel and deliver fuel to the power plant for it to be useful. Whereas, solar, once you've invested and built it, the fuel is free. And so during the middle of the day when it's sunny, there's enough investment in solar now that we're starting to face this problem of, you're exactly right. We have tons of energy during the day, and it's free. And so it's not like the paradigm we've had before where you can produce energy whenever you want, but there's a cost associated with it. And so being able to store that, to use it in the evening when obviously it's not sunny, and solar is not generating power, is sort of the next step. And there's some exciting projects happening in the Western US, where utilities are investing in giant shipping containers of storage that are going to be, a part of the grid, and can store energy during the day and deliver it at night, and can really kind of change how we think about the grid and the electricity grid in terms of how responsive it can be. And I think it's cool to see, because when I started with Utah Clean Energy, solar was a lot more expensive than it is now. I mean, it was only 8 years ago, but I didn't personally know anyone who had solar. I might never have maybe even seen a solar panel outside from like a small one that you would use to charge your phone or something like that. And now it's starting to feel like it's everywhere. And it's become so much more affordable. And that's happened in just, 8 years. And so when it comes to battery technology, the cost of the technology is kind of in a similar situation where it's just falling so quickly that I think, we'll be 10 years from now using battery storage in ways that we wouldn't have predicted right now.
Mm-hmm. So the next question that I have for you, Kate, is sort of relevant to this. You've been at Utah Clean Energy for 8 years. This is like, you didn't grow up in Utah, you came here as an adult. And I wonder if you could speak about the political environment that you encountered in Utah, especially in the energy and environment sort of space. I think a lot of people have the sense that, states like California and Massachusetts are really like the states that are leading in renewable energy development in the country. I don't think a lot of people would guess that the state with the highest installed wind capacity in the country is Texas, which is this state that's known for just being a petroleum powerhouse. But I think a lot of states have found that the business case that's to be made for renewable energy is outweighs any sort of attachment to fossil fuel infrastructure. And I'm wondering, I don't know if that's the case in Utah, but I'm wondering if you could talk about what the environment is and what you found to be true about, you know, working on renewable energy and like what most people would consider to be like a pretty politically conservative state.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think something a lot of people don't know about Utah is that it's a conservative state, and then Salt Lake City and the surrounding area are really liberal. And so there's a really interesting dynamic sometimes between the local government and the state that creates some really kind of, you know, bizarre situations and fights over like local control, and sort of reverses the dynamic that you sometimes hear from conservative states that, you know, about whether or not the state should be allowed to intervene in the, you know, affairs of a city and things like that. And I'll say too, I really kind of resisted studying public policy as an undergrad, which I think is funny now because I had this idea that it was about politics, and I was not interested in like politics or campaigning. And, you know, if politics is your thing, that's great. But I think I definitely wasn't, you know, I was more interested in figuring out how to solve problems and less interested in like how to politically frame them, if that makes sense. And so, but I think that, you know, it's working in a conservative state, it definitely sometimes feels like progress is slow compared to, and it feels like, well, there's these other states that are so far ahead of us. But I think when you face those challenging politics, it's also really forces you to be critical of your own, you know, beliefs and of the things that you think that you know, and to really kind of observe your own beliefs through this more critical lens, and be more open-minded to other approaches that are out there to solving problems, which, you know, in the end, I think helps to kind of develop a stronger kind of position or solution to a problem. And, you know, through that process of having to like re-examine what you're thinking and find a compromise, you might come up with a solution that's better than what the answer that you felt like it was, you know, you felt like you had in the first place. And so, you know, I think it creates an environment where sometimes it feels like it's hard to make progress, but you also, when you do come up with a solution, it's something that's applicable in other places. So it's not like you've just solved the solution for my, you know, community where people are really committed to this. It's like we figured out how to do this and to scale it, and how to show that it, you know, show that solar provides economic value and delivers these other benefits too. And I think it's also become apparent to me living here that there's so many important decisions that get made at the local level, and that local governments are really driving change in a way that's really interesting to see right now. And I mean, you see it with clean energy and local governments that are, you know, setting their own goals to take action on climate change, which is, you know, which is crazy to see cities saying we have a role in this. But you also see it in response to, you know, the COVID pandemic, and how success, you know, on some issues really comes down to how well local government leaders are able to be informed and make good decisions to you know, address an issue and move things forward.
So I just have one more question to you before I turn it over to the Q&A, but I'm sort of curious about this. So first of all, thank you for that. And now I have one more question for you before I leave you alone and let you speak to the students who are on the call. And that question is sort of relevant to the point you made about sort of working in this environment that is, making you essentially be like more flexible and more open in your thinking. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that more generally in your work, like when are you taking advantage of opportunities that you that feel like new and exciting, but also like an opportunity for personal growth, things you don't necessarily feel prepared to tackle? Like, how is that in this sort of early stage of your career, how is that manifested for you?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of the things that I work on now, when I think as I had opportunities to work on things that were interesting to me, I was always able to kind of try them out and jump into it, even if I didn't necessarily feel like I knew, you know, exactly what I was getting into. And I think that's something that's really helped me to sort of to grow is to be able to take advantage of those opportunities as they've come up. And so, for example, I mentioned I spend a fair amount of time involved in regulatory proceedings, and where I'm writing testimony that I'm then presenting to the Public Service Commission, and then defending it. And I think when I started that, I realized that it was a really important arena where decisions get made. And I also didn't have any idea what sort of job description it takes that job has, or what sort of qualifications it takes to participate, or if you can even take a class that kind of prepares you for that experience. And I didn't feel like I necessarily had the formal training on that specific kind of task or part of my job, but I recognized that that's a place where really important decisions happen, and I wanted to be involved. And so I was really grateful that I had the opportunity to work somewhere where my boss was willing to kind of push me into it and say, you'll learn along the way, and here's what I know, and to be supportive, but at the same time let me kind of take on something that was in retrospect maybe bigger than I realized, was biting off something bigger than I realized. And I think, for me, one of the most important things to look for in a job, kind of a first job, is that environment where you are given the opportunity to learn and grow, and sometimes take on things that are a little bit too big, and challenge yourself, but you do have that support to fall back on when you encounter challenges. And that's a really great way to start somewhere where maybe you're not sure exactly what you want to be doing, but figure it out along the way.
Well, I think that's a really awesome note to end this portion of the discussion on, and really great advice generally, especially for folks who are just sort of jumping into the uncertain waters of the job market. So there are not so many of us on the call tonight, which is obviously a little disappointing, but I think an opportunity it presents is that this can be more of a conversation than like a formal Q&A. So I'll say at this point, anyone, I guess just everyone, feel free to unmute yourselves. And we can just kind of start talking, start asking Kate questions, and we can just kind of go from there. And hopefully we can get a little bit of a lively back and forth going. So yeah, everyone go ahead and unmute yourself. And you brave person who has a great question to ask, just go ahead and step in there and ask it.
What would you say is the most frustrating part of your job?
I think I am laughing because I do complain about this a lot, and there's nothing I can do about it. But we have to keep really close track of our time because of how we bill different activities to funders. And so filling out my timesheet is the thing that I would absolutely get rid of, because I have to sit down every week and do that accounting of where have I been spending my time, and break it all out into 15-minute increments, and it's terrible. And so that's I know not a very helpful answer, but that is the thing that I really dislike the most about it. But I think one of the things that I find challenging just working for a small organization is that's very mission driven, is figuring out what are the most important things to be spending time on, and then figuring out how you make sure you're prioritizing your time to be focusing on things that feel important and impactful, and not get distracted by other things that come up and they feel urgent, or they feel like they're someone's sort of asking for help on something, and finding staying focused on things that feel like you are working strategically in order to kind of just avoid getting distracted by all of the other things that you could be working on. Other questions?
So it seems like no one has any other questions, but as I'm sort of wrapping up please feel free to butt in and speak now or forever hold your peace, or don't forever hold it, but rather reach out and get contact information from me so you can connect with Kate later. So I want to say a few thank yous here. First and foremost, thank you so much, Kate, for your time, for joining us for this webinar. I really appreciated hearing your perspective on like the landscape in which you are working. Hopefully, folks who joined us tonight also found it to be really helpful. As we've said, happy to connect you with Kate after the fact. If you want to have a follow-up conversation, hear more, you know, ask a question you didn't feel comfortable asking tonight. And yeah, I guess I'm gonna stop the recording now and just say, you know, thanks so much everyone for joining us tonight. Kate, do you have any final thoughts you wanted to share as we're wrapping up?
I think, you know, I'll say, I just really, I think this was an awesome series, and I appreciate this initiative because I do feel like there's kind of whatever your you feel like your skill set or your focus is, there's just so many cool opportunities right now in all sorts of, you know, energy, and I think it's really exciting to work in a field where it feels like things are changing almost faster than you can keep up with sometimes. And so I would say, you know, it's awesome that you have the chance to kind of get experience with the things that are like ways that the market is growing and changing while you're still in school. But at the same time, you know, that kind of first job is a really good opportunity to be a learning experience too, and to sort of dip your toe into something that maybe you don't know as much about. And so, you know, I would say, I think if opportunities come up that are exciting, then it's just so important to have people who care working on all sorts of issues related to the energy industry. And so I hope this has kind of given you some ideas and a different perspective about what, you know, what that path could look like. And so I think it's great to really appreciate having the chance to talk today.
Well, thank you, and thank you everyone for joining, and good night and good luck, as they say.